The Holy Gospel is written in the second chapter of St. Luke, beginning at the 15th verse. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known what had been told them about the child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, as it had been told them. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. Every Christmas time, we see something that was started a long time that seemed like it was a very good idea at that time. It seemed like it hit the nail on the head. But as it becomes kind of a common thing now at every Christmas time, it seems kind of hackneyed and out of date. We see the bumper sticker saying, "Let's keep Christ in Christmas." We see politicians going around and kind of indicating that they want to pass legislation that'll make it easier for people to say publicly Merry Christmas rather than Happy Holidays or season greetings. Remember, that became a very, very big emphasis about 20 years ago. And yet it keeps on and on and on. And I'm saying to myself, really, you think we forget the center of Christmas? I mean, there is the emphasis that we talk about these second-tier Christmas characters like Rudolph and Frosty the Snowman. But really, do they forget the centerpiece of Christianity? That Christ is the center and meaning of Christmas? Do we really think that Jesus gets lost in the wrapping paper and the bows? No, I don't think so. Most churches have these giant programs every year, and we go, and when the bigger churches have these wild programs, we all see the same characters. And the reason that the children fit in so easily this morning and so well is that they brought up all the characters from Christmas that we usually think of in terms of Christmas. But it really never dawns on us to talk about another person in Christmas that has always been left out and really doesn't seem to be included anywhere. We have secular stories about Christmas where we emphasize the bad people of Christmas. Most obvious one is Ebenezer Scrooge from Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Another one is the popular children's tale about the Grinch that stole Christmas. These are evil people, nasty people that we celebrate because they really emphasize the opposite of what Christmas means. But there is one character that we always leave off, even though we read about it in the Scriptures in the Gospel of Matthew. It's a part of the Christmas story. Now, by this time, maybe you've guessed, maybe you haven't. But that person is King Herod. And when we say, let's keep Christ in Christmas, I think as a church we ought to keep Herod in Christmas. Don't forget him. Don't leave him out. Because he's mean and nasty? Well, no. We'll find out why we should leave him in. But Herod, if you remember from other readings about Christmas, when the wise men come, they don't really know where to go. They saw the star. They feel that the king has been born, the king of the Jews, and they come to Herod's palace. And they think that he will know where this successor to his throne is. And so they come and they stop and talk to Herod, and they say, "Where is this king of the Jews?" Now, this does not humor King Herod at all. As a matter of fact, he's enraged. But he's not going to show his hand, right? These people can be used as spies. There's somebody that's a king that's going to replace me? I don't think so. I think we have to make preparations and take care of this situation right now. He says, so I've heard about this king too, he tells the wise men. But he says, I'll tell you what, I don't really know where he is, but I really would like to go and worship him too. So can you do me a favor, and when you find him, will you come back this way and let me know so I too can worship him? We know what Herod has in mind. Well, the wise men are kind of high in the intelligence quotient. That's why we call them the wise men. They see right through this facade. They're not going to tell him he's got something up his sleeve and it doesn't look good for Jesus, this person that we're seeking. So the wise men go on, they find Jesus, and then they say, well, let us go back a different way than the way we came, because we think that this guy is up to no good. Well, when Herod finds out that the wise men have given him the slip, he is even more enraged than ever. And now, the second part of this whole Christmas story comes out. And it is a devastating one, and it's fairly obvious to see why we don't include it in the children's program in Sunday school. Because it is something equivalent to the Holocaust. It is something equivalent to Hitler taking his SS men and going out and finding people that are innocent and slaughtering them. Because what Herod says is he takes his wise men, or he takes his soldiers, and he says, here's what your orders are right now. You go out and you find every male child under the age of 2 and you destroy him. So these people go out, and all of a sudden there is a massacre of little children, slicing throats, stabbing them with swords, and throwing them in the water to die. This isn't the kind of things we celebrate in Christmas carols, is it? Oh, but it is. It is. One of the loveliest Christmas carols is the Coventry Carol. And it's a very, very beautiful melody to it, but a very melancholy song. And it's a song kind of sung by the mothers who lost children during that Holocaust of its own. It goes, Herod the king in his raging charged he hath this day his men of might in his own sight, all young men to slay. Then woe is me, poor child, to thee, and ever mourn and say, for the parting nor say nor sing, bye-bye, lullaby, lullaby, a mourning for the children that were lost in the slaughter of Herod the king. So what does this dark episode have to do with the Christmas story anyway? And really, up until now, the Christmas story has been all light and wonderful stuff. But now it has a terribly dark edge to it. So first we ask the question, is King Herod somebody who would do this? Is this something just that was made up? Well, Herod, according to the records that we have from the non-Christian sources, the regular historical sources say, well, you listen to the facts. You know, Herod wasn't a king. He was simply a puppet. He was a Jew, but he was assigned by the Roman government to keep peace, to keep these Jews in check. They didn't want to deal with the religious issues, just wanted to do with the political issues. So you are given this special task, and you are made wealthy, by the way, if you accept it. But you keep your people in line so we don't have to disperse our soldiers, which are in short supply, trying to keep the whole world in peace anyway. So Herod accepts his task. He's a Jew, ruling his own people for the Roman government. And he does it with a great amount of relish. Now, according to the records that we have, Herod had at least 9 wives and at least 14 children. Probably had more children than that, because normally in records women weren't counted as a part of the children of a family. So Mary, his first wife, Herod kills on the charge of adultery. He has a trial for her. And the main witness for the prosecution is the daughter of the mother, and she is said to accuse her mother of adultery because she was threatened and scared that her dad would kill her. So the mother is charged and executed. Then the daughter says that she is now heir to the throne, and she takes over. But when she takes over, she tells the people that King Herod is not sound enough of mind to rule, which doesn't make her the most popular person on earth either. So immediately she is slaughtered, the daughter is slaughtered without any trial whatsoever. There are 2 sons of this marriage, and Herod appoints them to be his successors. But after a while, he thinks that they are getting too smart for their own britches. Probably they're in the teen years at this point, and he says, the boys got to go. So he pickets the emperor and says he wants permission to slay the people that are to succeed him, his 2 oldest sons. The emperor says, no, you can't do that. You guys have got to reconcile. This is bad for your kingdom. It's bad for us. Well, Herod thinks for a while, and then he discovers kind of a side way of getting in. The emperor wanted the Olympic Games for the coming year, and Herod said that he would front him enough money to bring him the Olympic Games if he would give the death knell to his 2 sons. So the emperor relents and says it's okay. But later is said, I would rather be Herod's dog than his children. Then he appoints another son, Antipas, from another mother to be his successor. But he says, I got to get rid of him too. At this point, the emperor makes a declaration to Herod saying, you cannot kill any more of your children. They are the ones that are supposed to rule after you, and this is bad for our rule of you. Well, Herod doesn't appoint any more of his children, but 3 of them become tetrarchs. They kind of like governors and compared to the president. And one of them is Herod Antipas, and Herod Antipas is the one that interviews Jesus at the crucifixion trial 33 years later. Could Herod done this task of killing the children of Israel? I don't think that there is any question. Nobody thinks it was an impossibility. So Jesus folks is told by an angel to take him down to Egypt for safety. And he goes to Alexandria and probably settles in the Jewish settlement in Alexandria, which was one of the most sophisticated cities in civilization at that time. And it is most probable that Jesus got his early training, his rabbinic training, in Alexandria under some very sophisticated rabbis. So, why do we talk about Herod? What is the significance of Herod being in this Christmas pageant? two things. First of all, it tells us what kind of a world Jesus came to. And secondly, it tells us again that we need a Savior. Herod reminds us that the world we live in is not so great, and there is trauma, there is evil, and he came and told us we needed a Savior. We celebrate Christmas with all our niceties and all our gifts, but we can't forget that Jesus came into a real world, not a world just of nice, placid Christmas scenes on a Christmas card, but he came into a dangerous, violent, and sometimes evil world. And so he reminds us on Christmas Day that we came into that same world, and we are a part of that world. And the gifts that we give are not, the gifts that we give under the tree are not nearly as important as the gift we give to the world in terms of winning a world that's evil for God's purposes. It tells us that today that there are desperate refugees from countries like Syria. They're driven out of their country that is totally devastated. And a lot of these are Christian people from some of the oldest Christian churches on the face of the earth. And they are saying it might never be possible to worship in that country again as a Christian. Of course, we know sometimes under the greatest troubles, Christianity appears to grow the fastest. The evil of Christmas reminds us that there are people sleeping under a bridge. And I know one of the friends of the member of the congregation here said, I've never gone under the bridges on Christmas morning to give food to those who are sleeping, to the homeless. And it's something I would like to try this Christmas. And I saw a little article in the Austin American yesterday that talked about helping to make it so homelessness isn't considered a crime. He came to a world not to destroy it, but to save it. Not to make excuses for it, but to give us the idea that there was something more important, something better in this world that he intended, and he put us here to make us a part of that improvement. He came to save us, and he asked us to do the same. And there are many people here in this congregation, many people in this world, in this community, that are suffering. Suffering from illnesses, suffering from problems within families, suffering with things that are troubling their conscience. And it is in this world that Christmas comes and says, yes, this is the real world, but this is why Jesus came. There's a story that comes out about Christmas I thought was really neat that I looked up. A couple had been going to church for some years in a congregation not too far away. And finally they decided they would get married. And it was to the delight of the congregation. Now they were getting almost into middle age, and they wanted to have children, and they had difficulty with having a child. But through some fertilization, some medical advice, she became pregnant. She went through a period of the child and of pregnancy, and then the children, they got to be twins, which we were very happy about because the doctor said this is probably the last one you'll be able to have, and so to have two seemed to be such a divine glory. So, unfortunately, the children came early at Christmas. Too early. Way too early. Despite modern medicine and the miracles that the hospitals seem to pull off these days, the two children died, the parents were able to hold them in their arms long enough to give them the names they had picked out: Mary, Elizabeth, and Abraham, Joseph. And then the children died, those with the names of the promises in the Old Testament of people that were given the promise of God's abiding presence. And so they were planning a baptismal service for this Sunday, this day after Sunday after Christmas. And instead of a baptism, they had to plan a funeral for their twins. When they sat down with the pastor and talked about the music, the man said, "We've been talking about planning this funeral, and we would like to have, as part of the music, Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World." The pastor was a little bit surprised, but I'm amazed he probably had the same background I did. He let them have the song they wanted, even though it wasn't the one he would have recommended. As the service closed, the person operating the speaker system turned on Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World after the funeral for these two children that really never lived. And then, as it was playing, something strange happened. The man got up, turned around, opened his arms, and asked his wife to join him, and they danced. They danced in front of the altar. And when the song was over, he turned and talked to the congregation and said, "I hope this didn't embarrass you. What we wanted to tell you, despite the fact that this is Christmas, and despite the fact that there seem to be so many idiosyncrasies, there's so many terrible things that happen, it is still a wonderful world because God's in charge and He is with us and our children are still with us. It really is a wonderful world simply because of the church and because of our faith." This is not a perfect world. It's a pretty harsh world. And as we see some of our own members come in to this church to worship when they are in very much pain, when they need devices to help them to breathe and to walk and all sorts of things, it is not a time, even at Christmas, to get depressed. It is instead a time when God reminds us that He came into an imperfect world, and even though there are terrible contradictions, terrible idiosyncrasies, terrible suffering, it is still a time to dance because God is here. Let us not leave Herod out of Christmas. Amen.